Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Saqqara Bird, ancient Egyptian airplane, or elaborate coincidence. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1898, during excavations at the ancient Egyptian necropolis of Saqqara, a small carved wooden object was removed from a tomb attributed to a priest named Pa-di-Imen, dated to approximately 200 BC. It was placed in a box labeled wooden bird figure and carried to the Cairo Museum, where it was assigned catalogue number PA 6347. For 71 years, it sat in storage, largely unexamined, alongside hundreds of similar votive objects. Then in 1969, Egyptian physician and amateur archaeologist Khalil Messiha was reviewing wooden bird figures in the museum's collection when he noticed something extraordinary about PA 6347. Unlike every other carved bird from ancient Egypt, this one had a vertical tail fin, a feature that does not exist on any bird in nature. In aeronautical terms, a vertical stabiliser of this kind is one of the defining structural features of a fixed-wing aircraft. Messiha also noted that the object's wings were swept back at an angle consistent with an aerodynamic profile. The claim has divided experts ever since. Aviation engineers who have tested replicas report it will glide. Egyptologists who have examined the original report it is a decorative bird with an unusual carving. The object sits in plain sight in the Cairo Museum. Its identity has never been officially resolved. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological or archaeological contexts that predate their supposed invention, represent one of the most contentious categories in all of science. The scientific establishment's response to such discoveries has historically fallen into two camps. The first is skeptical investigation, careful re-examination of the dating, the context, and the object itself, which often reveals a mundane explanation. The second, rarer response is acknowledgement, a formal revision of the assumed timeline in light of evidence that cannot be explained away. Both responses have legitimate roles. The history of archaeology includes many cases where enthusiastic amateur discoveries of supposedly ancient anomalies turned out to be forgeries, misidentified natural formations, or artifacts simply displaced from their original layer by post-depositional disturbance. Critical scrutiny of extraordinary claims is not closed-mindedness. It is scientific responsibility, but it must be applied consistently. The same rigorous scrutiny applied to anomalous claims must also be applied to the mainstream assumptions those claims challenge. And sometimes, when the evidence is examined honestly, the mainstream assumption is the one that breaks. The significance of genuine out-of-place artifacts goes beyond the objects themselves. Each one represents a data point in a larger argument about ancient human capability, about what our ancestors understood, what they could engineer, and how much of that knowledge has been lost. The ancient world was not populated by primitive minds in primitive bodies. The brains that looked up at the night sky 40,000 years ago were neurologically identical to ours. Given sufficient time and motivation, they could have discovered and lost almost anything we know today. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Saqqara bird, ancient Egyptian airplane or elaborate coincidence, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The object was excavated in 1898 from the tomb of Pa-di-Imen at Saqqara, one of Egypt's largest ancient cemeteries, approximately 30 kilometers south of Cairo. The tomb has been dated to approximately 200 BC based on ceramic and stylistic evidence. Pa-di-Imen was a priest whose burial goods included numerous wooden votive figures and ritual implements typical of the late Ptolemaic period. The wooden bird was among dozens of similar-looking objects recovered from the same archaeological context. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the artifact measures approximately 14 centimeters in wingspan and is carved from sycamore wood, the most commonly used material for wooden votive figures in ancient Egypt. Its wings are flat, broad, and swept slightly back, a profile unlike the rounded, feathered wings depicted in standard Egyptian bird imagery. Most significantly, the tail section bears a vertical fin perpendicular to the body, a feature anatomically absent in all known bird species and aeronautically identified as a vertical stabiliser. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The object lacks a horizontal tail stabilizer, the rear horizontal surface that prevents a nose from pitching up or down. Aviation engineers testing replicas report that this absence makes sustained level flight impossible without modification. Martin Gregory, who built and tested a replica in 2006, found that adding a small horizontal tailplane enabled stable gliding flight. The requirement for that modification raises questions about whether the original was ever designed with flight in mind, or whether its aerodynamic properties are coincidental. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Khalil Messiha presented his findings at the Egyptian Museum's annual conference in 1971, arguing the artifact represented ancient aeronautical knowledge and possibly a scale model of a full-sized glider. He noted the weight distribution was consistent with a flying model and demonstrated that a replica would glide when launched. The Egyptian government convened a committee to investigate his claims, which attracted international media attention and spawned a substantial body of alternative history literature centered on the question of ancient flight. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Cairo Museum's collection contains numerous other wooden bird figures from the same period and region, all displaying clearly representational anatomy spread wings suggesting birds in flight, painted feather details, and tail shapes corresponding to recognizable species, including the ibis A.N.D. The falcon, PA 6347, is the only example to possess a vertical tail fin, an absence of painted feather detail, and a wing profile more consistent with an aerodynamic shape than a naturalistic bird representation. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The artifact remains in the collection of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, catalogued as PA 6347. It is not displayed under an aviation or technology classification. The museum's official position has never included an endorsement of Messiha's aircraft interpretation. Photographs of the original have been examined by multiple aeronautics experts and Egyptologists, consistently producing directly conflicting assessments of its nature and intended function. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Saqqara Bird, ancient Egyptian airplane, or elaborate coincidence. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Messiha's aircraft theory holds that PA 6347 is a scale model of a full-size glider or powered aircraft known to ancient Egyptian engineers, possibly functioning as a design prototype or a votive model of an actual flying machine. In this interpretation, the vertical tail fin and aerodynamic wing profile are intentional engineering features, and the lack of painted naturalistic detail reflects the object's technical rather than decorative purpose. No corroborating evidence of ancient flight has been found anywhere in Egypt. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that aviation researcher Simon Cole proposed that the object functioned as a mechanical bird decoy or scarecrow, designed to be hung or suspended in ways that caused it to rotate in the wind and frighten birds from agriculture, fields, or grain stores. In this interpretation, the vertical fin is a practical feature for wind-responsive rotation rather than an aeronautical stabilizer. The theory accounts for the non-naturalistic wing shape without requiring advanced aeronautical knowledge, though no supporting textual evidence has been identified. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the mainstream Egyptological interpretation regards PA 6347 as a votive offering in the form of a bird, most likely a falcon associated with the god Horus, carved in an unusually stylized manner by a craftsman deviating from standard C. Conventions. The vertical fin is explained as a miscarved or schematic tail feature. Egyptologists note that artisanal variability in wooden votive figures is well documented, and that the absence of naturalistic detail in this example is unusual, but not without precedent. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Saqqara Bird, ancient Egyptian airplane, or elaborate coincidence does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes aviation engineer Martin Gregory constructed a replica of the Saqqara Bird and conducted flight tests in 2006, finding that the replica glided stably when a small horizontal tailplane was added to the rear. Without the tailplane, the model pitched down and fell immediately. Gregory's assessment was that the original design showed basic aerodynamic awareness, but was not flight-capable as constructed, and that the missing stabiliser was most likely never part of the original design. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. More than 2 centuries of Egyptological research have produced no textual, pictorial, or material evidence of flying vehicles in ancient Egypt. The Egyptian language possessed words for birds and divine entities that flew, but no technical vocabulary for powered or gliding aircraft. No mural, relief, papyrus, or inscription from any period describes the manufacture, operation, or observation of a human-made flying machine, which would represent one of the most significant achievements in all of human history. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed every other wooden bird figure in the Cairo Museum's collection and in published Egyptian archaeological literature depicts recognizable avian anatomy, feathered wings, naturalistic tail shapes corresponding to actual bird species, and surface decoration identifying the represented animal. PA 6347 is the sole exception. The complete absence of any other object consistent with aeronautical design effectively isolates PA 6347 as a unique case without supporting context from anywhere in the Egyptian archaeological record. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Saqqara bird, ancient Egyptian airplane, or elaborate coincidence. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Saqqara bird continues to attract attention in alternative history communities, but has not generated new mainstream academic analysis since Gregory's 2006 replica tests. Egyptologists consider the matter settled in favor of a stylized votive bird. The hypothesis requires a chain of unsubstantiated premises: that the object is a model of a real vehicle, that such a vehicle existed, that it was operated, and that no physical, textual, or pictorial evidence of any of this survived despite Egypt's extraordinary archaeological preservation record. Each link in that chain is individually implausible, and collectively they render the aircraft theory untenable by evidentiary standards applied in any other discipline. The object is nonetheless genuinely anomalous in its anatomical features, and the question of why it was carved with a vertical fin rather than a naturalistic tail has no definitive answer. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Saqqara bird, ancient Egyptian airplane, or elaborate coincidence. From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Saqqara bird ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.